The Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante consists of 4 novels: My Brilliant Friend, The Story of a New Name, Those That Leave and Those That Stay, and The Story of a Lost Child. At the end of March, I read the first book, My Brilliant Friend, and then as April began, in an almost fiendish way, I read the next 3 books in the series. I felt like I was under some kind of trance. All I wanted to do was read these books to find out what was going to happen. And in this series, we follow Elena, our protagonist, and our narrator. And we also follow Lila and a series of other characters, but the central characters are Elena and Lila, and we follow them throughout their lives from childhood to old age. And Elena and Lila are best friends, but their relationship is not just full of love. Their relationship is full of every kind of emotion, and it's a really truthful portrayal of what it's like to have an intense relationship with somebody. We watch them in every stage of their life and see how they deal with the difficulties that life throws at them. I think Elena Ferrante has such a clear understanding of people and what it is to live a life that reading these books feels a bit like therapy. I feel like I understand myself more as a result of reading them. And since I read these books within the space of maybe 15 days, I feel like these books took over my life a little bit, and that I became Elena. I sort of felt like I was living her life. I was thinking more really about her relationships than I was about my own and my own life. Elena's life is almost like a life that I lived. These books are a great exploration of what it is to be a girl and to be a woman. I also can't rank like these books. They're all 5-star reads for me. And also this, even though there are 4 books, the books are like one long novel. Actually, I went in Waterstones the other day and I found this beautiful edition, which is a bind up of all 4 of the books. And I so wanted to buy it because I don't actually own any of the copies, because I did borrow them from the library and now they're no longer with me. I had to return them. So because I love reading them so much, I do like the idea of owning the books myself. But the book was £45, so I have to think about it. Adulthood is expensive. So in this video, I'm just going to talk through a few of my favourite parts of these books. They are like my new favourite thing I've ever read. And also, as a consequence, I do find it quite hard to like really do justice to these books through the words that I use. But I want to talk about them nonetheless. There will be spoilers in this video. I mean, I don't think I'll mention anything that like dramatic that happened, but if you haven't read these books yet, maybe just approach with trepidation. So firstly, I want to talk about the writing. I think this book is a perfect example of the writing that I love. I read a review that said My Brilliant Friend was like Anne of Green Gables if it were written by Donna Tartt, and I do see the comparison. In mentioning the writing, I also need to mention Anne Goldstein, who is the translator for these novels. The novels were originally written in Italian and then they were translated into English by Anne Goldstein, who, even though I don't speak Italian, it would be amazing to read the books in the original language, but I think she did a phenomenal job, really. The writing is great. As I said earlier, I think Elena Ferrante has such a clear understanding of people and how their minds work, and that's really clear through the writing and the language in which she uses. This book has just made me understand myself better and given me such a comfort. Here is a list of my favourite quotes that give you a sense of the writing style. The protagonist Eleanor writes, "My inadequacy was constitutional, therefore couldn't be eradicated." And now I think that maybe on a daily basis whenever I make a mistake. Is it possible that even happy moments of pleasure never stand up to a rigorous examination? Maybe we really are made of the same clay. Maybe we really are condemned, blameless, to the same identical mediocrity. There are moments when we resort to senseless formulations and advance absurd claims to hide straightforward feelings. Every intense relationship between human beings is full of traps, and if you want it to endure, you have to learn to avoid them. Also, I really like how the language used, it seems really thought about. For example, there is a part where Lila is talking a lot about Enzo, and Eleanor could just write, Lila talked a lot about Enzo. Instead, she writes, Enzo was the singular protagonist of Lila's monologues. And I just think that's a beautiful way of saying someone talked a lot about someone. I may try to implement that in my own life. Another one is when Eleanor writes about Lila, and if she didn't stay alert, if she didn't pay attention to the boundaries, the waters would break through, a flood would rise, carrying everything off in clots of menstrual blood, in cancerous polyps, in bits of yellowish fibre. So yes, I just think the choice of words is really exemplary. I know that some people maybe appreciate a more simplistic writing style, and that sometimes when you're using lots of synonyms it can seem a bit over the top, but it never feels like this. It feels like instead the writer has really thought about the language that they're using and has thought about trying to explain things in a way that makes you view things from a different perspective. Now let's talk a bit about Elena and Lila. So Elena is our protagonist, she narrates the story, and as a consequence we are getting quite a one-sided view on things. If the story were narrated by Lila, the story would probably be quite different and our interpretations of things would also be quite different. But I do feel that Elena isn't an unreliable narrator. I do feel that she's being as truthful as she can, which maybe some people would have a different opinion about. There is a central moment in Elena and Lila's relationship, which happens when they are children, and is a connection between them throughout the rest of the story. So Elena and Lila are childhood friends. They have 2 dolls, and Lila throws Elena's doll through a crate into a cellar, and then Elena does the same thing. And what I love about this moment, as it shows that there is a connection between the 2 characters, they copy the action. Instead of Elena crying and going to her mother and saying, Lila threw away my doll, she instead copies Lila, which shows that there is a similarity between them. But also in this moment we see that there's also some kind of competition, some kind of malice in their relationship as well. And this aspect of their relationship is true throughout their lives, throughout the relationship they have. And I love how that really specific moment acts as a metaphor for larger ideas. And throughout the books, we see how Elena and Lila try to retain their ambition and their sense of self, while the world around them encroaches on their identity. The corrupt, violent world of Naples and the abuse of men often tries to shape their identities. And I think I felt like their connection with each other acted as a life raft in a way. It allowed them to try and cling to themselves while the world was constantly trying to change them. One of the themes I loved in the book as well is the theme of those that leave and those that stay. This is the title of the 3rd novel, and I think is largely what a lot of the story is about, because Elena has a lot of relationships throughout her life. She has connections with Antonio, Alfonso, Nino, Marisa, Gigiola, Pasquale, and a lot of others. And there are moments that feel very significant between Elena and the other characters. But as time moves on, as you continue reading, you realise those moments have faded and have become less significant. And it felt very truthful for what happens in life. Sometimes things feel like they matter so much, but then as time passes, you look back and you realise that they didn't really matter at all. And I liked how, even though Elena's relationships were ever changing, her relationship with Lila, although it ebbed and flowed, did remain somewhat consistent. There was a connection between them that prevailed despite the decades passing. I also really liked how the novel explored what it is to be a woman. There is a lot of feminist ideas running throughout the story. That's particularly prevalent because of the time period in which the novel is set. It's in post-war Naples, so when they are children, it's the 1950s, and then we go all the way up into the noughties, and the landscape for women during those decades was very volatile. In the 1950s, women had very little power, but by the noughties, women were able to be much more independent. And the novel does seem to suggest that for women, in order to be able to make their own way, education is key. And that is a key difference between Elena and Lila. Initially, they are both educated, but then Elena is given the opportunity to extend her education, whereas Lila is not. And as a consequence, Elena is able to then go to university. She's able to publish her novels. She's able to meet a successful professor and marry him. Whereas Lila, she has to marry Stefano at the age of 15. Lila is much more controlled by the men around her, and they constantly abuse her and mistreat her until she meets Enzo, who is a much kinder man. And so through this, we see the importance of women being able to choose their own destiny and not being forced into a life that was not of their choosing. And I love a moment where Marcello says that he can teach a girl anything, even how to whistle, which shows that he really does not believe that women have an ability to have their own intelligence. And as a response, Lila says, "I've known how to whistle since I was 5 years old." The novel also explores Naples and what it was like to grow up in Naples during the 1950s and 60s. And there was a lot of poverty that existed during that time. Elena and Lila together have to try and work to escape that poverty and to make a life for themselves. And I liked how even though Elena left and went to Florence and had a desire initially in her young adulthood to not return, she eventually did return. And it asked the question of whether we can really ever escape our upbringing and our roots. Do you think we are so severely defined by the world in which we grew up in? Also, we see a lot of the crime and corruption that occurs in the neighbourhood in Naples without necessarily knowing the reason behind it. So near the beginning of My Brilliant Friend, Don Achille is murdered and a man is put in prison for that murder, but then we later realise that it wasn't actually him who committed it. And a lot of other instances occur like that aren't necessarily resolved or aren't clearly explained as to why they happened. And that corruption that exists in the 1950s really still exists when Elena and Lila are in old age. And there is a repetitive nature to it, as if this corruption will never end and will continue forever. Okay, so a final note. Near the end of the Neapolitan Quartet, Elena writes, "Unlike stories, real life, when it has passed, inclines towards obscurity, not clarity." And this speaks to what the novels are really like. They aren't perfect, they are messy as life is. And I liked how it didn't end with a perfect bow, because life doesn't end with a perfect bow. I like how at the end, Elena and Lila didn't meet again and reconcile and like hold hands on a bench or something. And it made me think about our desire for satisfaction through stories and our desire for stories to end with a bow on the top. And all this made me ask the question, is it better to accept and live with the dissatisfaction or try to fight against it? And then it made me think that maybe a difference between Elena and Lila is that Elena tries to accept the dissatisfaction that comes with living a life, and Lila was unwilling to accept this and kept fighting against it, and as a consequence she was always full of unrest and was never able to feel content within herself. And honestly, I could talk about these books for a long time, and I think the way I took it that these books feels quite messy, which is maybe quite apt considering life, and these stories could be regarded as quite messy as well. And I feel like these books have changed me, and that I'll think about them forever. So yeah, I recommend them. Thank you for watching, it means a lot. See you soon.